Welcome to the Iowa Great Lakes. We have lakes everywhere. Come and see us. We have lots of water.
Historic. That word speaks volumes about the flood of 1993. And in the Iowa Great Lakes region, the story of the flood is not just about water. It's about a community pulling together in a common effort to protect property. It's a story about local government being pushed to its limits. And it's a story about 160 National Guardsmen who worked side by side with strangers, while for many of them their own homes and businesses were being threatened. Above all, the story of the flood of 1993 is a story about people, the people of Dickinson County, who pulled together in this time of crisis to fight the water and eventually win. But the story of the Iowa Great Lakes flood actually begins well before the historic high water of June and July. Its roots can be found in the months that preceded it. The fall of 1992 was a rather wet one, saturating the ground before it froze. Then a snowy winter came and left behind a significant snowpack. When the warmer temperatures of the spring of 1993 arrived, the saturated ground meant that most of the melted snow ran off into area lakes and streams. Of course, the wet conditions of those months did not cause the flood. A normal spring and summer would have led to only minor flooding. But as we all know, this was no normal year. The rains of April, combined with the snowmelt, meant that going into May, the lake's chain was already about 20 inches above normal. During the month of May, the area was continually pounded by storms carrying high winds and heavy rains. By the beginning of June, the lakes had reached their highest level in 10 years, and people began to get very concerned. The high water and winds made a damaging combination for shorelines around the lakes. Some properties, especially around Big Spirit Lake, were seeing several feet of shoreline fall into the water. Docks were being submerged or even ripped from their moorings, and some low-lying property was beginning to get wet. Then came June, truly an historic month. The raw statistics alone are enough to stagger the imagination. Over 11 inches of rain fell during the month at the State Fish Hatchery in Orleans. Almost 14 inches was recorded for the month in Superior. Measurable rainfall was recorded 19 out of the 30 days. 5 different times it rained more than an inch. And the lakes, which had been slowly rising ever since the ice went out, began to surge upwards. Prior to June, the damage was limited mainly to shorelines and some property. It was more of an inconvenience than a crisis. But every inch on the lakes affected another home or business, and soon a handful of loud voices demanding action became a chorus. By mid-June, the Dickinson County Board of Supervisors began their active involvement in the problem. Whenever the board was scheduled to discuss the flooding at one of their meetings, dozens of area residents showed up to voice their concerns and ask for action. The problem was becoming more than just a matter of submerged boat docks and vanishing shorelines. As Dickinson County Emergency Management Coordinator Lynn Wallace explained, the area's sanitary sewer system was being overburdened and raw sewage was being dumped into the lakes.
The sewer system was designed to handle approximately 2 million gallons daily. Due to the excess amount of water in the area, the plant is receiving 8 million gallons a day. So, I mean, it's over 300%. They cannot handle. That plant cannot handle another gallon. So they have had to discharge. I mean, that's a thing that they notify the DNR daily when discharges occur. There are samples being taken. Because of the volume of water, I don't think it presents a health hazard at this time. But you know, this also can cause destruction to a public infrastructure because of the overload that it's incurring. So that's why we have concern.
Many of the emotions at these June meetings were directed at the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. After then record lake levels in 1983, the DNR had discussed the possible installation of an adjustable structure on the south shore of Big Spirit Lake, something that would allow more water to be released in times when the lakes were high. But nothing was ever done, and 10 years later, residents were blaming the DNR for failing to act. Those opinions were expressed at a public meeting at the Dickinson County Community Building on Monday, June 21st. Mike Carrier of the DNR listened to the comments and told the residents that his office would do everything they could, but that there were still few short-term solutions. The agency's policy was that control structures not be used on natural lakes, and that even if they changed that policy, any release of water from the lake's chain would have to be a slow process. The reason? The water would eventually end up in the Little Sioux River, which had already been above flood stage for over a month. Carrier told the crowd that the effect downstream would have to be considered. Those warnings did not deter some residents who were determined to see a solution. Some even suggested extreme measures.
I believe there is a way of having some immediate rectification of this problem on Spirit Lake from what I've heard today. We speak of an enlarged culvert under the railroad, a bit of a backhoe, a little bit of dynamite, and that could happen. We heard of a culvert at the North Templar Park area that has no route access to it. A little bit of a backhoe, we wouldn't need the dynamite for that to happen.
At about the same time, the sandbags began to arrive for use by area residents. At first, a few hundred were trucked in, then a few thousand. Each new load was quickly snatched up by homeowners trying to keep water off their property. As the last week of June arrived, it was obvious to everyone that the flooding was not going to just go away. After a request by the Board of Supervisors, the county was declared a state disaster area. Just when it looked like it couldn't get any worse, it did. The storm of Tuesday, June 29th, brought winds of up to 80 miles per hour to the area and dumped up to 7 inches of rain, sending the lakes to unheard-of levels. The spillway at Orleans, unable to handle all the water, was inundated. State Highway 327 near the south shore of Big Spirit was underwater. In Arnold's Park, water gushed from manholes as the storm sewer system was overloaded. And at several points in the lakes area, Highway 71 became more of a canal than a roadway. Lynn Wallace said the rain was just what the area didn't need.
You wonder how people can take any more, and then they're tested. I guess the entire county was subjected to those heavy rains last night. Extensive road damage, property damage, and of course the lakes area is full to the brim. It just couldn't stand another drop, and then we're getting probably an 8 to 10 inch rise on Big Spirit, which is one that seems to catch it the worst, and then it's going to go directly into the other chains of lakes.
Many residential neighborhoods that had been fighting the lakes for weeks found they couldn't keep up anymore. Access to some residential areas became all but impossible as the level of the lakes jumped 8 to 10 inches following the rain. The combination of water and waves was wreaking havoc on the shorelines. In an effort to reduce the wave action, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources declared an emergency no-wake zone within 300 feet of shore on the lakes. July arrived with Big Spirit Lake about 46 inches above crest elevation. East and west Okoboji were at about 39 inches. Everyone hoped that the rain would stop, but no one was counting on it. And since there was nothing that could be done to stop the rain, the only way to alleviate the problem was to drain the lakes faster. There were two places where the flow of water from the lakes was restricted: the spillway and culverts at Orleans, where excess water from Big Spirit flowed into East Okoboji, and at Lower Gar Lake, where it went under a blacktop road and into Milford Creek. It was clear that any plan to drain the lakes would have to include those two spots. After much discussion, a solution to try to relieve the pressure was reached by the Dickinson County Board of Supervisors. On July 8th, they met at the courthouse and formulated a plan. Supervisor Wayne Northey.
Well, we're trying to get some of the high water from all the lakes down. We know we're getting great inflow from Loon Lake in Minnesota. The railroad and the City of Orleans has agreed to install two 24-inch tubes under the railroad east of the pump house in Orleans Monday. We are pursuing today, on Thursday, to, as quickly as possible, install two 36-inch tubes in addition to what's there in the outlet of Lower Gar.
While Lakes area residents were demanding that something be done, residents downstream on the Little Sioux River were wary of the actions. They had already endured flooding for the better part of 2 months, and they worried that any additional inflow would just aggravate their problems. But Roger Kay, a hydraulic engineer with the Army Corps of Engineers, tried to reduce those anxieties.
The additional outflow will increase stages on the Little Sioux by probably no more than an inch, if that. So we're not talking a very large amount of flow with what's going to be put in.
Almost as soon as those plans were approved, discussions of even more ambitious plans began. Lieutenant Colonel David Rogers of the Iowa Army National Guard arrived in the area, and along with county officials, the Iowa DOT, and the DNR, a multi-million-dollar comprehensive plan began to be developed. County engineer John Itis previewed those plans.
Part of this will be a redesign of the spillway outlet structure on Spirit Lake, and in conjunction with that, something for updating the Lower Gar outlet. They're looking for something for increased flow in a short period of time, something that can be done, constructed in 20-30 day period, and they're working on emergency plans for that. From my understanding, essentially the hydraulics will be done by the Corps of Engineers, design on structures by the Iowa DOT, and let and constructed under their auspices. Essentially, the county is basically supplying the location. We've got the critical problem that people finally reacted to it. Looks like we're going to get some work done in a short period of time and get some time a reasonable approach that's a long-term solution for the lakes.
For 2 days, it was utter mayhem at the Dickinson County Engineer's Office in Spirit Lake. Representatives from a number of different agencies worked for hours on end to try to find a way to get the lakes down faster while at the same time protecting the areas downstream. Finally, on Saturday, July 10th, a consensus was reached. Governor Terry Branstad flew to Spirit Lake to sign off on the plan, and it was time to get to work. The arrival of the Guard and the development of a comprehensive plan could not have come at a more crucial time, for even as the final details of the water release plan were being hashed out, Mother Nature struck again. Another 3 inches of rain, along with high winds, struck on the morning of July 10th, driving the lakes up even further. Of immediate concern was the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad embankment near the south shore of Big Spirit. As the lake had risen, the grade had effectively become a dike. Officials became very concerned that the embankment might be destroyed by the pressure. That would have been a disaster, sending a 3-foot wall of water into East Okoboji. Work began immediately at the railroad grade to strengthen it and stop any seepage. John Bertino of the Corps was confident that night that the efforts would pay off.
We've done a lot of sandbagging. We've added plastic to the slopes to cut down on some of the through seepage and seepage through the actual rock ballast that the railroad has put their ties and their railroad track on. We've done a lot of surveillance in the last 2 days. We've found some boils that we've built some ring dikes around, but right now with the current lake levels the way they are, I think it's going to hold pretty well.
It was a frantic weekend all around the lakes, but especially around Big Spirit. Lynn Wallace praised the cooperative spirit of the volunteers helping out.
We've got asked for volunteers to help with the Guard to get these bags filled, and this had a super response. It just shows you that people in an adversity can really pull together.
Sure, they all of them look like the door against the wall. Hey, the guy's taking a break. Come on. Hey, scratching my nut. The guy's having respiratory failure here. Look at that spot earlier. Okay. No, we hadn't got. Hell, you're gonna take balls.
Kind of take a look at it.
No, it's green.
What's back this way, Nick?
There you go, Mike.
Step on that truck.
There's only 5 years. Wheels aren't on the ground. Yeah, you got chain? Wheels aren't.
Still coming. Dump ball.
Let's go. More big. More. Yeah, see the line going.
Go ahead, 19.
It's going for quite a while.
I did.
They got 1.5 million people load this truck.
Is there any down here? Or?
Right across to where they went down across. Get it?
Right here's the last one. No, right here.
Here. Hold up. I remember who the guy is.
Spiraling around again.
Look out. See, that's the airport.
Gollum doesn't have a brain, he doesn't think.
Oh, fine. Get the back of your neck and the top of your hair.
Oh, your pussy's right.
There you go.
Have on her lips. She took Abby out for 1 grand in baseball.
In addition to shoring up the railroad, efforts began on the north shore of Big Spirit Lake to stop the overflow of water from Loon Lake in Minnesota into Big Spirit, thus relieving some of the pressure. Jackson County, Minnesota officials had consented to allow the water to be held back by dumping sand and gravel on the county road which straddled the state line. All day Saturday the 10th and the next morning, several different contractors from the area unloaded load after load of material on the road, hoping to keep the water in Minnesota. But the water always stayed one step ahead, and the effort was stopped on Sunday. While the emergency measures continued throughout that weekend, preparations for the $3.85 million flood control project itself began. Again, the Corps' John Bertino.
At the Lower Gar outlet, we are going to be placing a 12-foot wide by 5-foot high concrete box structure that will have a control system on the upstream end so that we can regulate the discharges to the downstream area.
First, Phase 1 of the project began at Lower Gar on Monday, July 12th. A 12-foot by 5-foot concrete box culvert would be installed under the road next to the existing spillway, increasing its capacity by about 300 cubic feet per second. The culvert was equipped with gates so that the outflow could be controlled. In order to handle the increased water on Milford Creek, a new 12-foot by 6-foot culvert would be placed under County Road 834. At Old Highway 71, the road was simply cut to allow the extra water to flow through. The 12-foot square culvert on New Highway 71 would serve as the control structure for the entire project. As work began at Lower Gar on July 12th, Big Spirit was about 51 inches above crest. The Okobojis were at about 48 inches, and following weekend rains, they were both still rising. As work was just beginning on an overall flood control project, all around the lakes the sandbagging continued. In only a 3-hour period one morning, 100,000 sandbags were handed out. Truckload after truckload of the bags were brought in to supply area residents, and they were immediately snatched up. The American Red Cross called for volunteers every day to help fill and transport sandbags.
We need helpers, particularly doing sandbagging. That's our biggest need. Right at the moment, I have about 15 people in the elderly category or for health reasons that are just not able to do sandbagging and that type of thing themselves. And at the moment, I'm way short of people to help them. I realize that a lot of them will be coming in this evening, and that's great, but if there are people that can help out this afternoon, we certainly have plenty of jobs to help people in need.
That's what you call them, right? You know, we're just working it out. Someday we'll work out of Lake Park, okay?
Officials also work day and night in Okoboji to protect Highway 71, the lifeline to the area, from being overtopped by East and West Okoboji. In an effort to further reduce the wave action on the lakes, the DNR expanded its no-wake order to cover the entire surface of the lakes. That meant that during the height of the boating season, most recreational boating was banned, and that had local businesses concerned. Tom Kuhlman is with the Iowa Great Lakes Chamber of Commerce.
Well, it's really difficult to measure that at this time. There's certainly a lot of people that come here to enjoy boating, and that's going to be a little hard to do with that speed limit in place, but at the same time we see the necessity of that speed limit. So I think what we need to do is encourage people to come here and use our amenities and facilities and other things that aren't affected by the high water, and potentially keep our economic condition in place.
Besides the loss of tourism dollars, Kuhlman said more and more businesses were being physically affected by the water.
Until this last shot hit us, we was probably at 3 resorts that were affected. Now that's increasing. A number of our restaurants and stuff close to the water are starting to be affected. It's time to have this rain stop, we know that.
Yeah, White Zombie. That's now one summer in 1996. Pull it. Yeah. 3 pallets left. Okay. Use them up. You got that cows on your farm? Yeah, what? Oh, yeah. What do they eat? Silage. Yeah. Yeah. We got
As the day of the water release approached, hydrologist Jeff McClenathan of the Corps explained the end goal of the water release.
What we're looking at is trying to lower the lake level to 24 inches above the normal weir crest. That's how they measure the water level up here in the lakes. They have a structure that determines an ordinary high water mark for the lake. That's their reference point. And we're looking at a point 12 inches above that.
introduce a few people that are here. Kevin Quinn is up here with the Corps Public Affairs Office, and he may have some information for us. But I believe that the other Corps representative that we've got here, Jeff McClenathan, will be the Corps spokesman that we'll use here today and talk a little bit about exactly what the Corps mission is. We have Lynn Wallace also at the table. He is hosting a meeting of other emergency county coordinators. I know that the Clay County, Cherokee County, Woodbury County, I think, and Buena Vista. Are you here also? Okay. Those emergency county coordinators are here to discuss the Little Sioux River flood basin, or the floodplain or whatever, and how the release out of the lakes area will impact on the Little Sioux. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dave Rogers. I work for the Iowa Army National Guard, and my job up here is really that of a facilitator. We're probably dealing with something like 10 to, well, I guess it'll be up to that, 12 to 15 different agencies, and it takes somebody to keep trying to get all that stuff coordinated and keep everybody informed. So that's really my job here, is to just facilitate the meetings that we're having and keep this project rolling on down the road. Any questions about what I've said so far? If not, I'm going to turn this over to Jeff, and he's going to talk about what the Corps mission is, and we'll roll right on into the Little Sioux discussion.
First, I'll just give you a little background. The Corps has been kind of involved in this since July 4th, when we first got a request from the state of Iowa. Last week, we've had several people in and out providing technical assistance and working on plans to help evacuate the water from Spirit Lake and Okoboji and Lower Gar Lakes in a controlled manner. Since then, we've got a new mission, which would include to remove and replace existing structures on, I guess it is Milford Creek, and we're in the process of beginning design and hopefully some construction on that. And the only other thing I guess I'd like to say is I'd like to really stress, I personally have heard a lot of rumors in the past, and I want to make sure that we were planning to have a controlled release. I've heard a lot of rumors I don't even think I want to repeat. So, and what we're planning to do is we have gauging stations located along Milford Creek and Little Sioux all the way down to Spencer, so that we can gauge our releases and make sure that we know exactly what's going on.
What is the floodplain level or the flood basin elevation of the Little Sioux? We will answer that question with all of these flow measuring devices.
Yeah.
In this exercise that we're running here, we're on literally a disaster recovery mission. That's what we're doing. We are planning and coordinating on the fly, on the run. If the Little Sioux literally won't take any more water, it's already out of its flood stage, out of its flood plain, rather. The last word I got is we're not going to give it anymore out of the lakes. Now you get another 6-inch rain based on what we got now, or some inches of rain, and I'm not sure we even know that data, we're all going to be in real serious trouble.
None of us can control that.
That's right.
We have no control over that. So you have the control over what's already there. Our feeling in the southern part of Peterson is that the river is, I know it's higher than it's ever been in 23 years that I've lived there. And my feeling is that the darn thing is full. We don't need any more water. And if you have a bucket full of water and you put another bucket or another cup in it, it's going to run over.
In Spencer, where the Little Sioux River was running about 6 feet above flood stage, officials insisted that the outflow at Lower Gar be closely controlled. Public Works Director Chuck Fisher.
With our storm sewer systems and their culvert systems, that is one that is comfortably the level that we can comfortably handle from Spencer. From what we've been able to get from the Corps, until Spencer reaches the comfortable level where it's not endangering any physical structures or physical plants of the city, they won't release any water.
The Corps agreed to place a number of monitoring devices along Milford Creek and the Little Sioux River to keep a close watch on the water levels. The release of water from the lakes was a long-term project. Models developed by the Corps showed that with normal rainfall, it could take months, perhaps as late as December, to get the lakes to the target level of 12 inches above crest elevation.
We assisted in designing these structures, starting construction on these controlled outlet structures at Spirit Lake and Lower Garland.
Is the construction already been started on them?
Yes, it has.
When do they expect completion of this?
I believe we're looking at Friday night is our estimate where we can start.
And then is there going to be release right away, or is that going to be one of those things that
let me back
you
up
don't
a
know?
second. Our estimated time on Lower Gar is 6 o'clock Friday night. And the contractor plans to move up to Spirit Lake. So that'll be over there. And then what we'll do as soon as things are in place downstream, we'll start to try to slowly release things and see how. It's not like we're just going to pull all the stop logs out at once. We're going to do it very slowly and measured, and watch the staff gauges or measuring devices all the way down.
Finally, the big day arrived. On the evening of Friday, July 16th, the outlet at Lower Gar began to be opened. At first, just a trickle, as officials watched the effects on Milford Creek closely. With the new culvert about a third of the way opened, the Corps was pleasantly surprised. Gauges on the creek showed almost no change. That was the best news the area had received in months. Progress was slower on Phase 2 of the project near the spillway at Big Spirit. Delays were met there when there was trouble locating utilities in the area. Also, the high water itself was creating problems. Originally, officials had wanted to begin releasing water from Big Spirit about a week after the Lower Gar release began, but the complications caused that schedule to slip by several days. On Saturday, July 17th, another milestone in the flood of 1993 was reached. On that day, the lakes reached their highest levels ever. For Big Spirit, 55.68 inches above crest elevation. For the Okobojis, 55.8 inches. But the worst was over. Originally, the hydrologist had predicted that the release project would reduce the level of the lakes by only a few tenths of a feet per day. So when the lower lakes went down by about half an inch the first day, no one was too surprised. But the next day, an inch was lost on Lower Gar, and by the end of the first week, it was down about half a foot. Big Spirit, meanwhile, held nearly steady at around 55 inches. Fortunately for the entire project, no more significant rainfall was received in the area. Colonel Rogers of the Guard assessed the project's progress.
Really, things are working out just pretty well. Lower Gar should be in operation about 10 days at least before Big Spirit starts to empty. And of course, once we get Big Spirit emptying, we will develop additional head pressure and velocity that you're not going to notice an immediate raise in the in Okoboji or the Gar Lake system either. I mean, there will be a raise, but it isn't going to go back up to the 2 feet that we would have taken off, because we're taking it off now almost 2/10 a day, which is really pretty good. So best guess is with no rain, we could have the Okobojis and the Gar system down, you know, 1.5 feet, 2 feet before we go to with a Spirit Lake release. And this will be the same program, Spirit Lake. It's going to be a controlled release. I mean, we're just not going to send a wall of water down through the lakes. So things are going good.
The long-awaited moment for the release of water from Big Spirit came on the afternoon of July 26th. The culvert, capable of releasing an additional 340 cubic feet of water per second, was opened partially, then all the way. Rainfall limited the release's effects the first day, but by the next day, the same inch a day as the lower lakes was seen. It was the beginning of the end. As August arrived, the flooding crisis began to subside. Lake levels were dropping by about an inch or two a day. Slowly, life was returning to normal. But for those whose homes and businesses had been hardest hit, the hard work was just beginning. For as the lakes receded, it revealed the destruction that the high water had left behind. The damage was tremendous. A survey by the American Red Cross found that a total of 438 primary residences around the lakes suffered damage. Those figures do not include secondary or summer homes, which comprise about 70% of the homes on the lakes. Those homes were not eligible for disaster assistance by the Red Cross or the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Overall, FEMA tagged the total damage to primary residences, businesses, and the infrastructure to around $25 million. And that figure doesn't include the loss of business revenue to the area, which was significant. Tom Kuhlman of the Iowa Great Lakes Chamber of Commerce estimated that business in the county was off 40 to 60% for the summer, with a loss of about $50 million in revenue. Hardest hit was the tourism industry, which serves as the engine that drives Dickinson County. And while not directly affected by the lake's flooding, agriculture also suffered severe damage from the wet summer. It was a summer that Lakes area residents will never forget. Here are just a few of the stories of the flood of 1993, as told by the people who battled the lakes. Rick Sari is the manager of Arnold's Park Amusement Park on West Okoboji.
High water, low income. And I guess that's one thing that I've always stated is, we've had about twice the amount of work here for, 75% of the normal year income. But I have a great feeling of my staff and how they supported myself, and never saying no, is part that I'll always remember, and it got real difficult sometimes to keep your chin up and keep everybody else's chin up, but we all bonded together, like I say, and it was a real good feeling that when we accomplished it and conquered the flood, that we felt a great amount of accomplishment and achievement, and so that was a neat feeling for us. Well, of course, Curtis, we had a major sandbagging operation. We filled over 6,000 sandbags from floodwaters that came in from the lake area. We not only had that to battle, we had the sanitary sewer district. We're in the lower section of Arnold's Park here, so we get the runoff from the whole town, actually. And we got some flooding in from the sanitary sewer district, which flooded the Lake Street down here. And that particular street was closed down from, the first part of July through the 3rd of August. And we downsized the park operation. We had 9 rides closed about 6 days until we could build our sandbag wall. We had 4 pumps hooked up with 4-inch outlets that we'd pump out the water. It would be seeping up through the ground, and we'd be pumping it back out. So we had an extreme amount of work involved in keeping the park open, but we did keep it open. We never closed it down completely. I know the colonel from the National Guard recommended that I close, and I guess he didn't know me very well. I'm the type of person that kept the operation going. My nickname's Yes Siree, so that's not going to get us down. We had about twice the amount of work this year, and our receipts now show that we were down about 25%, which I feel real fortunate. I think that's directly attributed to my staff and myself keeping the park open and operating. I tell you, it was really great, the camaraderie of my employees. And of course, I'm the type of person, like I say, that gets out into the trenches with everybody else. I wasn't sitting up in my office. I was working side by side with everybody down there. And the camaraderie that was involved in my staff was just fabulous, really. It kind of bonded everybody together, pulled everybody together, and we had a main purpose in mind, and that was to keep the park open. And we did that. We did accomplish that. It wasn't easy by any means. I'd walk out of here after an 18-hour day, crawl home, be back in here at 8 o'clock the next morning. We worked crucial hours, 100-plus hours a week just to keep the park in operation. And it was difficult, but it was kind of fun, too. I love a challenge, and so it was a heck of a challenge.
One of the hardest hit residential areas was South Templar Park on Big Spirit Lake. Albert E. Montgomery lives in the area.
Well, we had in the South Templar Park area flooding, which went over a period of about 2.5 months. We started about to fill in the first week in June, And we began to flood, and the water came up and involved, let's say, about 24 cottages on the southern portion of South Temper Park, and in the 11 cottages in the northern portion, we didn't have any damage. And they did know that this situation as far as the spillway was concerned, the dam over near the southeast corner of Spirit Lake, was known in 1983 that this could happen. And the DNR didn't see fit to do anything about it at that time. And so the people didn't feel good about it at all. They felt that it should have been prevented. I think they should lower the spillway over at South Templar Park more, so that the water level here will be down. Now, I don't know. I think that the reason we've had this flood business is because there was great rainfall. That's the key part about the change up where the water comes from. I don't think it's changed any, from Loon Lake and southern Minnesota and so forth, and I don't think the water's running any off the land any faster than it probably has been for maybe many years. But we had a lot of rainfall, and this outlet in Spirit Lake was the key. It didn't take care of it.
Tom Steele's home is on the south shore of Big Spirit Lake near the spillway in Orleans. He describes some of what he went through.
I don't know if we really fought it. I think we just flowed with it. Oh, it was all right. We survived, that's about all I can say. We had about 2 feet in it, in the garage and the crawl space. Street side, it pretty much cut off from everything. Out on the front side, lake side, there wasn't too much damage. My sons and I quit counting when we got to 500 sandbags.
Just for your place here?
Just for our place.
And all those had to be
we boated them in.
You had to boat them in?
Boat them in. The water came up so fast, it was across the street. But that day we got the 4.5-inch rain, it was too late to even think about sandbags by that time. So when we finally boated them in, I can tell you one thing, in our canoe, you can put 16, but don't put 17. And our little rowboat holds 25, but don't put in 26. We boated most of the time. That or the canoe. The neighbor finally put his dock across the street so we could walk in and out. But when it came to getting groceries and anything big, kids came home for the summer, we used the boat to get it back and forth in. When it came to getting sandbags in and out, we all helped. A lot of the summer residents packed up and went home. So I would say on the whole, the neighborhood got very well acquainted before it was over with.
Steele had a front row seat for the National Guard's efforts on the railroad bed.
Well, they did a humongous effort. If you figure the number of sandbags they put in there, had to run into the thousands along the track, wading waist deep in the water. And no, only the officers had the rubber boots. The troops were in there in their regular boots and fatigues. On the whole, I thought it was they did a pretty good job. I think they did a hell of a job.
Tom, what will you remember most about the flood of 1993?
Didn't get much work done other than filling sandbags.
So kind of the lost summer, huh?
It was sort of a lost summer. But I wouldn't have missed it. I've been disappointed if I hadn't been sitting here.
Kind of witnessed history then.
Mm-hmm. That's basically it.
Throughout the long, wet summer of 1993, one person served as the principal coordinator for all the flood fighting efforts. Lynn Wallace, Dickinson County Emergency Management Coordinator, shares a few of the things he had to endure during this sandbag summer.
And I didn't have any sandbags. Dickinson County was not in a floodplain. We weren't required. I was not one of the counties that had to keep them. So that's when I was first aware that I had to start bringing in sandbags to keep these people, protect their properties, keep it out of the, running in their front door. And it turned out to be a much bigger project than I could imagine getting them here. I had a little insight, the fact that my own son is a hydrologist. He's with the state of Arizona, And so by visiting with, he said, get a hold of the Corps of Engineers, right away, Omaha District. So I was talking to a gentleman by the name of Red Harris, the chief engineer for the Omaha District of the Corps of Engineers, early on. And I knew that he had sandbags in his district, and my closest ones were at Gavin's Point, which is actually in Nebraska, but just south of Yankton, South Dakota. So I just knew that was where I could get them and get them the fastest, the quickest. And matter of fact, that's what I was doing the 4th of July. My wife and I were hauling them home in a county truck. And as you mentioned, the end result was 760,000, just over 750,000 sandbags that were used in this county. I didn't lie to anybody, but I did stretch the truth one time. I hope I'm forgiven. In one of the companies that was so good at being able to backhaul trucks as they came in, and I guess it's not a secret, Stylecraft from Milford, major furniture manufacturing in the county, had trucks coming in daily, and by rerouting through their dispatcher, we were able to bring their trucks in and have them pick up sandbags either from Yankton or from Camp Dodge down at Des Moines. They called me from Des Moines, of course, but this time, midway through the flood, Curtis, Des Moines was suffering also from the flooding, and I'm sure it was a zoo out at Camp Dodge. Their dispatcher called me and said, we just filled a truck for Dickinson County with 46,000 sandbags, a Stylecraft truck, and there's another driver here says that he's supposed to pick up sandbags. And I said, I didn't get a truckload. You people have just fouled up your records. I want that truckload, and I want them rapidly. And I didn't lie to him, for I hadn't received that first truck. So I was able to get one step up on him there. I had another truck on the road to getting the second 45,000 that I hadn't received the first one yet. So that was the thing that put me over the top, so I was able to start keeping the supply going. Otherwise, it was just a hand-to-mouth operation. I couldn't get them in fast enough. The line, we even had to have uniformed officers help to keep peace. It was a sad thing, but we tried to ration them so that everyone at least got some. So we tried to eliminate the hoarding problem. Not that I know that it existed, but we just tried to keep it so that people were at least had some to satisfy their needs as quickly as possible until we got more in. So I don't want a repeat of '93.
Wallace, along with some of the other key players in the flood fight, were honored by the Iowa National Guard for their assistance during the flooding. County Engineer John Itis, Dickinson County Sheriff Greg Balloon, Spirit Lake Principal Cheryl Hall and her staff were thanked for allowing the Guard to use their facilities. Clara Anderson, the cook at the high school, who kept the Guardsmen fed. And Herman Richter and Paul Hedberg, who organized a radio fundraiser and gathered over $100,000 in one weekend for flood relief. These are some of the heroes of the flood. But some of the biggest heroes of the flood are the ones you'll never hear about. They are the volunteers who help their friends and neighbors protect their property. They are the property owners themselves who fought the good fight. Some won and some lost, but everyone gave their all. The people of Dickinson County and all of Northwest Iowa pulled together and got the job done. When historians look back at the summer of 1993 in the Midwest, they will probably focus on the record flood crests on the Mississippi River. And they will tell the tale of the capital city of Iowa, which went without drinkable water for a month. They'll also relate how the frequent heavy rains caused huge agricultural losses. Few of them will care to tell the story of the Iowa Great Lakes and the crisis here. But we will all remember. And when the history of our own little corner of the world is written, you can reserve one chapter to pass along the story of the Great Lakes area flood of 1993. Truly, a sandbag summer.